We have a special treat for you tonight. We have Dr. Susan Baum with us tonight. She presented with us last year at our in-person conference, and she's such a joy to have. She is the director of the 2E Center for Research and Professional Development at Bridges Academy. It's a school for twice exceptional students. She's done all kinds of work, published all kinds of things. She's one of the biggest experts we know around twice exceptional students, and we're excited to have her here with us tonight. And her presentation is titled, When the IEP is Not Enough, Strength-Based, Talent-Focused Planning for 2E Students. So we are so excited to have her here with us. If you can help me welcome Dr. Susan Baum with us. She's going to get set up here.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. I'm going to share my screen and hope for the best. Okay. We're going to talk about what happens when kids who are 2E are imprisoned often by the IEP. So to give you some background, let's review a little bit what 2E is. Most people know today, but I'm starting off with one of my favorite students just because I have everything is in a focused way to get done in a very economic way, so you have time to get your questions answered at the end. So Sydney went to Bridges Academy. She was diagnosed on the spectrum. She also had problems with attention, not when she was doing her art, but during other times. She scored on the attention subtests on the WISC in the 3rd percentile. When she arrived at Bridges, she was very oppositional defiant. But we are careful when we see children who are really bright and talented on the one hand. She had 150 IQ and verbal abilities. She was extremely artistic, had trouble making eye contact, typical things that kids on the spectrum show us. But when we say oppositional defiant, the first thing we have to ask is, why is that? Is that part of the diagnosis, or is that because she's just in the wrong environment? You see, these kids are gifted and they have wonderful strengths, and then they have challenges that keep them from performing and doing well in school in traditional environments. What we saw with Sydney when she came to Bridges, that she had a history. And the history was that those strengths, artistic, high verbal ability, advanced reading, they were on her record. When she came to Bridges, look at the challenges. They said she was extremely argumentative, oppositional defiant, little productivity, severe attention issues, would not participate in physical education, and very, very awkward. What her parents told us is that when she was in public school, they said, yes, we agree she is gifted. We agree that she has a lot of social and emotional issues. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to put her in a gifted class for reading, but we're going to put her in a social skills program and give her occupational therapy for help with handwriting because she did not put anything in writing. Well, folks, this absolutely failed miserably. And it failed miserably because they didn't understand what happens when very bright kids experiencing challenges, and the combination of those two together are problematic. They put her in that advanced class for reading, but guess what? They asked her to write more and more. She didn't write. So that did not go well. The teacher of this advanced class said she cannot be gifted. She doesn't put anything in writing. She doesn't finish her work. In the social skills program, her vocabulary far exceeded the other ones in the class. She was a little sarcastic, a lot sarcastic. These were kids who were not of her intellectual ability, and that failed miserably. And no one really tried to figure out why she wasn't writing. And it wasn't that she needed occupational therapy. It was really a mess. And this is the kinds of things that the IEP usually picks up. And so, as I explain in my book, Should Be Gifted and Learning Disabled, the IEP doesn't work because these kids are complicated, they're complex. And it does not consider the yellow. There's no place on an IEP that talks about what that gift is and how that gift manifests itself. Often on the IEP, they're focusing on grade level performance, where she was reading 3 years above grade level, for instance. Specialized instruction is not required, it's only optional on an IEP. And where they're supposed to use strengths and interests to help these kids, it doesn't work out well. Let me give you an example. This isn't Sydney's IEP, but I want to show you a sample of an IEP where this is about a young woman, Caitlin, bright, enjoys creative writing, has difficulty with the conventions of writing, grammar, spelling, punctuation. Caitlin is shy, intends not to participate in class. She does enjoy participating in her literature circles when she is with students with whom she is comfortable. Caitlin has difficulty with organization and following multi-step directions. And that, excuse me, in that little summary, folks, we know what she's good at. We have a hint at where those gifts are. But when we look at that IEP, it's filled with accommodations and modifications. And it doesn't even mention that creative writing is a strength. And maybe if this child were writing something for publication, we could teach her grammar. It misses the point. It misses the essence of who these kids are. And it provides traditional accommodations, traditional recommendations that one can get right off a computer, but certainly does not reflect what we need to know about these kids who are twice exceptional. We are doing, I want to show you a different kind of report. It's something we're using more and more at Bridges. I'm going to just show it to you briefly and have you compare it to what you just saw. This is called a summary report form from our suite of tools processes. And it gives a little description of what 2E kids are and what some very important things. Observational findings. It starts off, when do we find this child engaged? Andrew performs optimally when engaged in areas of high interest, such as history. Discussion centered on interest areas, drumming, and hands-on activities. And it talks about when he's at his best behavior and when he struggles. Then it goes on to say, well, what are his abilities and interests? And then it talks about what is his his preferences in terms of his personality style. Then it gets in, if this child is in your class, you must make sure that they have environments for optional growth. We're talking about the intellectual environment. So for Andrew, it's important to remember that Andrew is a bright student with advanced abilities that must be considered. For instance, it would be important to consider pace of learning as well as the level of novelty and content, especially in the areas of language arts, history, and music. when bright kids are diagnosed with ADHD and the work is repetitive and not novel, it is impossible for them to pay attention. You don't see this on the IEP. They don't talk about what environment will bring out that creativity. What physical environment does he need? Usually for ADHD kids, they say, put him next to the teacher, where in our reports we say ADHD brains need to move. Make sure there's a thinking lane where he can pace and think about what he wants to write. What do you need in that social environment that's going to make him have friends? And how do we keep him from being so anxious? What about that emotional environment? The IEP does not stress these kinds of things. And so I don't want to go on and on with this. I just want to have an idea of the kinds of things we talk about when we say, what do these kids need? So I'm going to close this and hopefully get back easily to the report.
When you clicked on that link, we just saw your slide. It didn't actually show us and it's okay, but I just wanted to let you know because I know you said you have another link coming up. So I'm not
going to. I thought it was interesting because I thought we fixed it.
I know. I don't know if when you're sharing your screen and you go to the link, if you have to stop the share and then reshare it so that whatever you pulled up is showing. But I just wanted to let you know.
The video seemed to work well, but going outside the environment doesn't always work well. Thanks for telling me. We'll take care of it. So what I'm trying to say that we talk about these kids being bright and challenged, yellow and blue, but they're really green because the gift is always present, even in times when this child needs extra support and remediation. And that challenge is always present, even in a talent development environment. We need to remember this child has at least two parts, and we can't serve one without considering the other. And as Kermit says, it isn't easy being green. And that's why we need to think about things in a very different way. And we're talking about then what do these kids really need? They need not to be worried about fixing them. Instead, they need a strength-based, talent-focused education. They need an environment that focuses on what they can do instead of fixating on what they can't do. We talk about strength-based, talent-focused education, that it empowers students to thrive academically and socially by creating an environment in which gifts are recognized and developed, and learning differences and disabilities are accepted. What the people in positive psychology are telling us, treatment is not just fixing what is broken, it is nurturing what is best. So what does that look like? It looks like when you're trying to create curriculum, you need to understand how to use these kids' strengths. The first way is to leverage their strengths. So if I know that this child is really good in music, can I use his understanding of whole notes and quarter notes in music to help him if he's having trouble with fractions in math? We want to talk about if we know that this child is very spatial. Would we understand that perhaps if he used Legos and built the setting for the story, that would be a better pre-writing activity than having him just brainstorm? That's leveraging the strengths, integrating the strengths. How can I use their strengths, interests, and talents as entry points into any unit? How can I give them choices that allow them to express what they know in ways that align to how their brains are wired? How can I provide choices for the whole class where it becomes natural to have them integrate their talents and gifts? And finally, and for me probably most important, is where is this child getting to have his talent nurtured? If this child is really good in music, do we pull him from music classes so he can practice writing? That would be a sin. And so a strength-based, talent-focused curriculum looks at leveraging strengths, integrating strengths, interests, and talents, and then making sure that that child has a talent plan as well. So, when we go back to Sydney and we think about her again, a strength-based, talent-focused approach at home and at schools allows growth even in deficit areas. And that's what I want to spend time explaining. How, when we're looking at strengths, do we also address the challenges? Remember, we didn't have a whole lot of strengths for her, but we can think when we had Sydney come to Bridges, we knew again that she was an avid reader, she was a metaphorical thinker, she was insightful, and we understood that she was argumentative, but we saw that as a strength. We understood that the oppositional defiance may have been just a reaction as a survival skill. We understood more about her. And we understood that she didn't produce very much, especially if we asked her to write. And we did understand that physical education was not a great place for her. We saw her at her worst. So at Bridges, what we do is do something called the suite of tools. It's a process to plan for these kids in a way that generates the kind of report that I shared with you at the beginning that you couldn't see. And we collect information in ways that supplement what we do when we're doing a neuropsych. And I was on a child study team. I was a learning disability teacher consultant. I led these teams. And these are the things we never asked. And I want to share with you the kinds of things that we do in the suite of tools. And the first thing that we do is something called clues. We begin to collect information about the students. And one of the most important things to collect is, what are the expectations that people have? Let me go back one. What does a parent want for the child? What does a student want for him or herself? What does a teacher wish would happen? Because if we're not all on the same page, it's going to be hard to work together to provide the optimal environments that these kids need. We look at their strengths, we look at their interests, we look at their personality, we look at special aptitudes and interests. We spend a whole several pages collecting this kind of information rather than just the deficit areas. One of our favorite instruments is called the learning print, and I'll show you how it works. Here's a little clip, and the clip should work fine.
Okay, on the front, make sure you've got your name at the top, today's date, and when you guys are ready, go ahead and turn to page 2. So page 2, the topic is strengths in school. So if you look at the chart, you'll see it's got a list of subject areas. Some of these are the names of classes. Some of these are topics within those classes. Some of these you may never have had, and you can see that there's a column all the way on the right. You can mark a class you haven't had, but you can check I like it, you can check I'm good at it, or you can check both, or of course you can check neither if you don't like it and you don't feel you're good at it.
Humanities is the most interesting because there's so many topics you can explore between social studies, architecture, building, art. It's all, writing, social studies, it's all in the humanities. I wish they taught foreign language to younger students because it's good for travel. Because you sound so dumb if you go to a place in Africa if you're speaking English. They know you're a tourist and you don't want to stick out.
And then don't forget the box at the bottom that says my favorite school subject is. What is the class that you would like to have all day?
My interest for drawing started when I was 9 years old. Even in like kindergarten and preschool, I could draw more than all the other kids.
So college level arts courses.
But I'm the only 11-year-old in that class. Everybody there, over 20.
Wow.
And so we spend time talking to the kids about their interests, interviewing them around their interests, and then trying to figure out how we're going to be able to integrate them into the curriculum. We also use what we call the QPIs, the personality profile. Everyone has a profile because everybody's everything. But we want to know what the preferences are. Are these kids more people persons? Do they like to work in a group? This is my profile. Are they really our little intellectuals who love to argue? They like to argue with the teacher. They like to argue to learn. They think it's the best way to learn. Are they creative problem solvers who can give you 25 reasons why they didn't do their homework? Or are those kids the practical manager kids who are very linear? They are the secret assistant teacher in the room who knows where everything is in the room, who goes to gym at what time, who needs what. We are all for these things, but there are things that in areas that show up in opportunities that help us to thrive. And so once we get that kind of personality, we look at, interests and the strengths and the learning preferences. This is Sydney. Sydney loves to draw, read, and argue. She's drawn to visual and performing arts. We talk about her parents' background. We talk about she's a learned expert, a creative problem solver. She has special aptitudes, and we know that she is advanced in certain areas. We also look at what is keeping her from succeeding. And when you say these are obstacles, there's two ways to deal with them. One is you need to make sure that she gets support in these areas like writing. But the other equally important question is, what can we do so she can succeed and avoid having her write? We need a two-pronged approach. Because if she can do a mural about the class system in the Middle Ages for social studies, why does she have to write? If I want her to write an essay to get into college, she better know how. She's a really great arguer. I bet I can get her to write after she debates something. These are all important. What are the obstacles? How do we get through them? And how do we get around them? At home, too, what are the obstacles to success? But the next one is my favorite. We find out when is this child at his or her personal best. This is the best piece of information that we could ever find out, because you know what, folks? We have to do more of it. Whenever they're at their personal best, how can we give them more of those experiences? And when we get all this down, we then come up with those very important components of what should show up in these environments I mentioned before. What should her intellectual environment be like? What should her creative environment be like? Et cetera, et cetera. And we try then to take these ideas of environments and have a sketch pad where we list everything on the left that we know about her, her obstacles, her strengths, her interests, and how could we put them into a classroom unit that she's about to start. And it's just a place for a team of teachers to get around and say, gee, if we're going to do the Middle Ages, let's let her study the stained glass windows. Great entry point for her. So it's not writing a unit, it's not writing a lesson plan, it's just coming up with things that we might want to include. Let's hear what Sydney's teachers had to say about her, just in general, when they really understood how to get her to function in the regular curriculum.
Sydney was a fascinating student to work with across the years. When I first came to Bridges, she was in 8th grade, and Sydney would not write if she didn't wasn't engaged in the topic, and I really never saw her write as an 8th grader.
Sydney tried to explain what it's like having this impasse for written expression. It's, you know, I think, she said, I think in paragraphs, I speak in sentences, and I write in words. It just keeps diminishing until it's just a struggle to get your thoughts out.
We knew, though, that Sydney was absolutely an artist through and through. Every cell of her being was meant to create art and do art. So that creating assignments around that strength became a goal, and it became a joy.
So for a couple of years, for all my basic projects in chemistry, I was allowed to draw comics with a bunch of information on specific elements. Like 1 year I did copper, 1 year I did gold, 1 year I did iron, and I did these little comics about them. And I could turn these in and get full credit for them.
I've seen her write now and produce pages and pages of fiction and nonfiction, but it was because we knew the entry point, and the entry point was the strength.
And so we knew how to use art in many different ways. We also knew how to use her debating ability, her arguing ability. And before you knew it, she was thriving in the curriculum. And did she learn how to write? Yes, she did learn how to write, but never handwriting. We skipped that part, and she used a computer. But not only is the goal to try to get the children to thrive in the curriculum, in the dually differentiated curriculum, where we try to get her to avoid her weak areas as she learns through a variety of resources and a variety of options what she needs to learn the regular curriculum. We also need to figure out her talents. And why talent development? Talent development is extremely important therapeutically. First of all, when you're in your talent area, you automatically are working in an area that aligns to your brain's wiring. If you're an artist, if you're a debater, if you're a builder, if you're a musician, that's how your brain is wired. It's intrinsically motivating. Kids get into flow. It's purposeful, goal-directed. And this is the best place for kids to develop executive function ability, because it's something they want to do, it's something they want to get better at, and it's something that helps them with time management, meeting deadlines, because in these talent development opportunities, there are things like contests, there's writing contests they can join, there's the play that they're in, and the play is going to be given at such and such a date. It is a natural way to get them to focus on these kinds of skills. And it's a window into their future. But very interestingly, it's very therapeutic as well. When we worked with Sydney, we not only, this is kind of a way to show you what we come out with, the suite of tools, we noticed what she was good at. We took stock. We figured out how to take these things on the left-hand column and get them integrated into the regular curriculum. Have moral dilemmas in the classroom, have mini debates, make sure you have drama in humanities. There's all ways that Sydney could thrive in the regular curriculum, but we also said, what do we have in the school that would develop those talents? And what can her parents engage her in? So instead of being homework policemen, the parents act as opportunity makers and help Sydney find those opportunities outside of the school that will help her thrive and develop those talents. But I want to talk to you about something that is very important to us at Bridges. There's Sydney in 8th grade. She was refusing to go to gym. She had meltdowns in gym. That was her worst area. She was what I would call a real klutz. And that didn't do well for her. And she was embarrassed. And she was at her worst because she was so embarrassed and anxious about her lack of ability in physical education. And so she spent a lot of time in the psychologist's office because she just, not as a punishment, it was a place to recover her self-image. She suggested to the psychologist that the blank walls were silly to have in her office, and that she, Sydney, had an idea for what she could put on those walls. And she said, I think you can do art therapy with the kids. I think my kids are nothing but a series of monsters and creatures, and I'd like to paint a mural. And so she wrote a proposal to the school head, and he said, instead of going to gym for the next marking period, you could work on your mural. Talent development. He said she needs a talent development opportunity right now because she's in a bad way. And he called it a TDO. And he said, you know what, Sydney, we're not going to argue with you about how you're going to behave in gym. We're going to let you work on something meaningful because we honor that you have this talent. After that, folks, she just turned around. She got to be nicer. She was much more receptive to learning how to write and to be more social with her classmates. As time went on, talent development drove her to overcome some of her challenges. She said to the art teacher when she was a junior, you know how I avoid looking at people in the eye. I know I'm on the spectrum and I just don't do it, but it's reflecting in my art. I am not painting and showing people's eyes. So this year, I'm going to really look people in the eyes because I need my art to improve. Amazing. When you're motivated to overcome your challenges, you'll put much more time and energy into it. A part of her senior project was that she painted her classmates. She did caricatures of them. She knew what made them tick. She understood the essence of who they are. And you didn't think she had social skills because she was on the spectrum? Far be it. She certainly did. She certainly loved those classmates and used her art to show their special relationship. So her parents put her through all kinds of opportunities, which made her really have the stupendous portfolio that allowed her to get into Caltech. This is what we mean by a strength-based, talent-focused curriculum. I'm going to skip ahead because it's just another example of it. We already went over it. So when we talk about the suite of tools, we talk about using it to create the kind of curriculum that these kids need, the kinds of environment that we need, and so that they end up with a specific talent plan and they end up with a strength-based report that they can use to augment the IEP. It's all those things that the IEP doesn't talk about it. And together we can make phenomenal programs for these kids. As Edward Hollowell says, I have learned first and foremost to look for interests, talents, strengths, shades of strengths, or the mere suggestion of a talent. Knowing that a person builds a happy and successful life not on remediated weaknesses, I have learned to put those strengths at the top of what matters. Edward Hollowell is an expert in ADD, and he wrote this when he was apologizing to his clients that he had been more interested in helping them get over what they could not do than supporting them in building up, what they can do, what they were good at. We know that it's hard sometimes to put those deficits on the back burner and to deal with those deficits indirectly. Because as parents and teachers, we first must acknowledge that we accept these kids for who they are. And in that acceptance and that kind of building of a positive relationship, they are much more receptive to paying attention to what it is that they can't do. I am going to go back and play this one little clip for you, because you met him in the learning print. Sam did not read. Sam hated writing. Math was difficult. He was a builder through and through. And he could build anything. And he was a naturalist. He was at his personal best when he was camping. At Bridges, he was able to take place in something we call the Chicken Club. And he became the president of the Chicken Club. Because we had chickens. And he was impassioned by making sure that these chickens had the appropriate environment. And in his role as president of the Chicken Club, he did things we never could have gotten him to do with that Chicken Club. This is him reading.
To whom it may concern, the Chicken Club has showed quite a bit of success for this past year. The program is therapeutic for students. Students have learned about life cycles, composting, animal behavior, and so much more. They have problem solved on creating shelter and protection. All students have practiced calculations on how much supplies to order and cost. So all of these items above show how we've been such a success in the last year. On another note, we are now making $15 a week, which adds up to $60 a month from our 3-laying chickens, laying 6 to 7 eggs each week. So we did some calculations that if we could get 2 more chickens at $35 each, we could make $30 to $45 a week. This would lower our out-of-pocket costs and save up for their retirement.
He was willing to learn how to write a persuasive essay to get permission from the head of school to get more chickens. He also was extremely bossy, and he was president of the Chicken Club, and that's when we taught him social skills. If you're going to be the leader of these kids, you need not to be bossy. You need to exhibit leadership skills in a positive way. Through talent development, through their strengths and interests, we can instill in these kids what they need to be successful. We so believe in this. We so believe that they should be, there he is, in another enrichment cluster. There he is. He's also a wonderful cook as part of being a naturalist, doing a demonstration about how to make butternut squash soup. His classmates loved that he cooked for them. His classmates were in awe when he built a bench for the school as part of an independent study. They began to see Sam as someone who was giving, a great leader who tries really hard to overcome what he can't do when it's purposeful and meaningful. And so, again, using the suite of tools to understand these kids better, to plan, to have meetings around these kids, providing each of our kids with a talent plan is going to help them become who they're going to be. And we so believe in this, that this is our philosophy at the Bridges Graduate School, where we're training more professionals to be out there providing this kind of advice. We also are going to, at our Bridges TUI Center for Research and Professional Development, we are going to be able to offer these strength-based assessments for people who might like to get their child assessed, or if a school wants to do it. They'll be able to purchase a suite of tools and be trained in the suite of tools if that's what they would like to do. They're available. We can't keep them a secret at Bridges any longer. This is what all kids should be doing, and we really feel it's the best way, especially because those IEPs are just not sufficient. Thank you, and I'm willing to field any questions you might have about our approach at Bridges and what we really believe can help these kids, these TUI kids, thrive. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And
thank you so much, Susan. I was over here just jotting notes and notes and more notes of all of the phrases and ideas that you had. Sydney, who you highlighted in your presentation tonight, she's part of the 2E movie. I'm not sure if everyone has seen the 2E movie. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that so they can see more of the stories?
Yes, the 2E movie was produced about now, I think the first one came out maybe about 6 years ago. And Sydney was part of the kids that were featured in that movie, because we realized that our senior class, it's when I first started at Bridges, these kids were in 6th grade, and we realized how much they had grown. And we did a research study to try to figure out what were the major components that helped them grow. And at the same time, one of the parents who was on our board of trustees was a filmmaker and said, we need to draw attention to these kids. I want to make a movie about them. So he did, and it's called 2E Twice Exceptional. And then about 3 years later, the second movie came out called Teaching Twice Exceptional Children, and it mentioned some of these strength-based ideas that I shared with you in my presentation. And they're available now online. You can get them. You can go online, look for 2E Twice Exceptional, and I think you can rent them or purchase them. They are easily available online.
Awesome. I think that's a great starting point, because I think sometimes when we're trying to shift someone's thinking around how to program or think about these 2E students, sometimes success stories are a good place to start to get that buy-in.
Yeah, I think that we need to not think we're ignoring their weaknesses, but when we go into more of a remedial mode or deficit thinking, somehow we forget their gifts. And if we forget their gifts and forget what they're good at, they don't have that emotional energy to overcome these really debilitating challenges. They are whole people, and we can't look at them as half a person. So stories of success do work well.
That's awesome. I wrote down a phrase or a sentence that you said that I thought was so profound. You said, the IEP as we know it misses the point, the essence of who these kids are. And to not be seen for who you are or valued for who you are is devastating to these students.
And I feel that because I come out of special education initially, and because I was on these teams, I feel justified in saying we really didn't do the best job we could have done. And there's a lot of things I've learned from special ed that we in gifted education should be using. But at the same time, there's things that come out of gifted education that we need to share with people in special ed. Together, we can have wonderful conversations. But what I think gets lost is that all of us have our brains that are wired differently. We need to celebrate cognitive diversity and neurodiversity. So if someone is wired to move, to think, then having them sit next to your desk so you're not distracted and you don't move is counterproductive. And so by understanding this gifted child with bodily kinesthetic gifts that needs to get up and move, it's a sin to overwhelm them with medication that makes them sit still. So that's where I don't think we really get at how these kids learn, because we don't dig deeply enough.
That's so true. We don't dig deeply enough. You know, we can always come up with excuses, not enough time or resources or staffing, but we need to do our best to dig deep to find out how we can help that student be successful. I want to honor, I know we chatted about this before we went live, but I want to honor our CAGT member who submitted that question ahead of time. One of our members from Durango had asked a question about, is there any research around percentages of 2E students who were either identified gifted first and then noticing that they have a disability that requires the IEP, or IEP, and then we find out that they're also gifted. I know we chatted about it, but if you want to share your answer here so everyone can hear it.
There's no direct research about the numbers of kids, but we do know that that is an issue, and my feelings are because it is the people in gifted who seem to be more aware of twice exceptionality than the people in special ed. And so the people in gifted begin to identify these kids, and some of them underachieve. This child is gifted, but. And so I think that more kids might be identified as having a learning challenge after they're identified gifted than the kids who are sitting in special ed who are highly gifted, but no one is paying attention because that part of them is kind of hidden. And that's the group that I'm not more interested in. That's what drove my attention to them initially, because I came out of special ed and I realized there's so many really, really smart kids who are in are in our resource rooms, and what are we doing for them? But I do think their gifts are overshadowed by their disabilities, and they don't get identified as gifted as easily.
I was just thinking, the way our current system works, we try to fit these kids into our system rather than bend the system to fit the kids we have. And
that's right.
Yeah. So we have a couple questions coming in. Someone said, all of this information is so enlightening. When will the Bridges testing be available here in Colorado? So maybe if you want to revisit your suite and how people can access that, or what that might look like for people who are interested.
Yeah. If you go to bridges.edu or to the 2E Center, it'll talk about the suite of tools. And we do offer training. There are a group of people from Colorado who really wanted to begin to use this to supplement the IEP process. We train groups of people. We have summer training. You can encourage them to get a certificate in 2E from our graduate school. But again, bridges.edu, we're going to make an announcement probably in January when we're going to be launching the ability to get assessed virtually through our 2E Center. But there is no reason why people right here in Colorado could not do those suite of tools, use those suite of tools. They are for purchase. There's training videos that go with them. And we also have a lot of people who would love to come out and train a group of individuals who would like to be using this approach.
That sounds wonderful. Is there a way that people can, because I think that you put out a newsletter as well from Bridges, is there a way that people can get on like an email list to get information from you guys?
Absolutely. You could go to, again, there's the 2E Media and the 2E News, all at that site. Let me show that. I have this slideshow for you. And let me go back. Let me share the screen again.
Sure.
And I forgot. If you go to https:// take a picture of this, tinyurl.com/when-IEP. So you can get this PowerPoint. It does not have certain things in it. The videos are not in it. That report is not in it. But certainly it has also how to get in touch with us. On the front slide, the first slide gives you our email address, and then the other two slides, this one is our Bridges Educational Group. And in it you see the graduate school, the TUI news, where you can have access to a monthly newsletter and to a magazine that comes out twice a year called Variations, and then the TUI Center for Research and Professional Development. And you get to know about Bridges Academy that's going to launch a virtual high school. So lots of great information by going to this website, and they'll give you lots of links to hook up with different people depending on what you're asking. Feel free to contact me, susan.baum@bridges.edu, and I will send you in the right direction anything that for information you might need.
Awesome. Susan, this all looks amazing. It seems like a lot of great information to share with families who have TUI students and are needing resources or direction or help in figuring out what their students need, but also for educators, a lot of great resources for furthering their understanding and knowledge of how to best serve and support our TUI students.
We're very committed that all of us have the skills to work with these kids. We shouldn't have to send them to a private school. They should be able to get more needs met, because it's not hard if we just understood them better.
I think that's a good note, because I think, you know, behind the scenes, we're all like, we wish there was a Bridges Academy in Colorado, but I think what you just said, we can all serve these students. We just need the right tools and information to do that here in Colorado. I don't see any other questions coming in here on our Facebook page. So I think we kind of got all that. So if you have special education teachers in your lives who are unaware of what TUI student, who they are, how to serve TUI students, a ton of great resources. TUI movie, Teaching Twice Exceptional Students might be a great place to start and share information. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. We really appreciate it. This has been phenomenal. And I think just the excitement around what you guys are putting out for people to continue their learning so that we can serve our students who are twice exceptional here in Colorado to the best of our ability. So thank you so much, Susan. And
any of you, susan.baum@bridges.edu.
I know you're so nice. You let people contact you directly. You're awesome. And so before we go really quick, I just wanted to let you know that next Tuesday we have Joy Lawson Davis sharing with us. So that'll be a phenomenal presentation. Susan and I were talking before we went live that she's working with her, and there's a lot of conversation about E3 and including cultural and ethnic diversity in the conversation as well, not just 2E, but 3E. So we're excited to have Joy Lawson Davis join us next week. So same time, same place. We'll see you all here next week. Thanks so much. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.